So thank you very much for your interest. We are filming this so that we can put it on our broadcast platform, so obviously it reaches a broader audience, but you are the select few and we are thrilled to be talking to you. I'm particularly thrilled to be here to help launch the Power of One here at Spring Fair, and to just perhaps justify a little bit of why I've been working with Julie, why I'm thrilled to be working with Julie, because I have seen change in my industry. I work in fashion, as you know, having been very vocal since the early 90s about the lack of body diversity we have in our portrayals of specifically women, but increasingly men, and having been able to work campaigns, impactful campaigns, right through from consumer take-up and into education and real change, even government white paper policy around the need for diverse representations and portrayals of humanity. And you know, just to frame that with one little impactful study, because that's really what we're all about, is recognizing how we can leverage change, is that when consumers were seen to be making bonds with the models in the campaigns they were looking at, they were noted to be doing it through shared characteristics, and when they did that successfully, they showed an increased intention to purchase by 300%. So doing something that has meaning at its center actually has a business benefits, doesn't it?
For sure, and I think it's very interesting that recently we've seen a lot of change in fashion. I read with interest the story you wrote about the hashtag outfit of the day. I was slightly horrified. I don't know if anyone in this room has actually done it, but what Caryn identified was that many women and men probably are buying outfits, Instagramming themselves in the outfit, not actually wearing it and sending it straight back, which I found really quite horrifying and couldn't believe anyone would do it. So for myself, I lust after clothes. It's a bit of a relationship, me and clothes. I fall in love with them, and then once they've purchased, they're with me for decades. So I was wondering, why do you think, are consumers really changing, and what is driving that change?
I think there's lots of aspects to the driving of change. I think we all want to be involved in something that has meaning. And although we experienced a wonderful democratization of fashion in the late 90s, as big design names were taken through into high street and were able to offer consumers really directional trend, and because obviously it was mass product, they had much more powerful buying opportunities for quality fabrics. We were all excited as an industry, but we didn't then see that become a much larger thing where it was literally price competition and nothing else. And so I think we've come full circle in fashion, and what is driving change is the need for people to feel emotionally connected with what they're doing and to feel good about where they're placing their money.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in fashion, we all know that maybe t-shirts have cost at worst 10 pence to actually make. But it's when we've seen the human element, seen people, children in factories in certain areas, that we can then truly empathise. It's that human face when it brings it front of mind. And I think that's been very interesting that in fashion, I feel there is a movement towards change, and that we've seen people becoming more empathetic towards the supply chains. And I think fast fashion, there has been a reaction against it, both on a government level and between the dialogue of brands and retailers. But I think perhaps in the rest of retail that there is a war on plastics at the moment that perhaps we could say is having its moment in time. And when we look at the scale of the problem, the climate change problem, we all know it's there. We sort of sometimes put our hands over our ears and our hands over our eyes trying to ignore it, but it is very much there. I feel slightly disheartening as a mother of a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old that we're leaving it to the younger generations to fix this problem. And perhaps we should have acted a little bit sooner. I know you're very passionate about this and wondered, how do you think we can motivate groups of people to do something different, both individually in their work, with their social groups, but also in the workplace, in businesses? What will really get us all motivated to do something different?
Well, certainly my experience in fashion has been to, I think, where there is transparency to start with, where we say, we're not sitting here in a righteous position and we know the answer. Actually, all saying we're all part of the problem, therefore we all become part of the solution, so that each and every one of us becomes a valuable voice, not part of a hierarchy in which many people feel undervalued and devalued. So one of the campaigns that I co-founded in 2009 was called All Walks Beyond the Catwalk, in which we created an important narrative for students of fashion to enact around the diverse human portrayal by looking at their own diversity and by recognizing that in their families there was race, age and body difference diversity, and that those people had needs from fashion, and why was fashion ignoring them? So many universities, up to 35, got involved to create projects in which the students were able to bring in members of their family in order to listen to their needs from fashion and to deliver design that was fit for purpose. And they all said they made huge emotional connections with that project, unlike many others where they thought they were designing for rich, white, thin teenagers, which ultimately that is a very small part of the demographic.
It certainly is.
So it is about bringing that person in and empowering them through the excitement of what they can contribute.
Do you think there's a generational difference? Do you think that potentially as you get older, you become more active? I don't know. What's your take on activism through the generations?
Well, certainly, we've had the benefit of reading the Generation Z report, which are, of course, the inheritors of the planet and our future consumers. And what we do know is that they're split into two groups.
I think millennials, so I'll take the millennials first.
Yes.
I'm not a millennial, I do apologise, but I do know a lot about them. And I think we get a lot of trend information in retail about different age groups, Generation X, Generation Y, millennials, the Gen Zers that are coming through. I think there's been activism in all kinds of generations. I marched on Greenham Common. Don't know if anyone else even knows what Greenham Common is, but I was there walking around Greenham Common, and we all have heard about women, in the 50s burning in their bras. Activism has always been there. It's not just something for the younger generations. But we've seen some very interesting reports recently on changing consumer behaviour. And I think there are some generational differences. I don't think anyone in retail, whether you be a supplier, a brand, or an independent retailer, should underestimate the power of the millennials. I've got a few interesting facts. So 1.8 billion people are millennials globally. And their spending power will soon be greater than any other generation. So if you want your business to survive and thrive and evolve, you need to get to know millennials for sure. They're the most socially conscious generation of any others. Speaking for a little bit of an older generation, I'd like to disagree, but apparently they are more socially conscious. And as they're entering into their 30s and having children, this is really intensifying. A lovely stat that I found was that 73% of millennials are willing to pay much more for sustainable goods. So that's definitely something any of us involved in the supply chain should take care of. And they want to know, is it cruelty-free? Is it fair trade? But they're definitely willing to spend more. The Gen Zers are a little bit different, and I know you've got a little bit of a take on the Gen Zers, which are slightly younger, my daughter's age, I think.
Well, one of the interesting things has been also, as a mother, listening to both my daughter's friendship groups talking about what's meaningful to them. And the fascinating thing about Gen Zers is that they can be divided into, I think, beautifully titled Gen We and Gen Me. Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing is Gen Me focusing on the self and on the interior, on emotions, feelings, struggles, anxieties, and obviously displaying a lot of distress.
Yes.
We're seeing a counterbalance with Gen We, who are focusing on externals, the world out there, what needs changing, what do we need to do, and how can I use my power on social networking. What an incredible tool for passing on knowledge, and also my hard-earned money. And one could say the optimistic hope is that Gen We are able to empower Gen Me through information on social networking and to liberate them by being, let's just say, body positive influencers or sustainable conversationalists or anything to do with gender, race, or class inequality, so that Gen Me gets slowly bought into an empowerment of what they can do with their own special magic in the outside world, instead of focusing on what's in front of the camera lens.
Yeah, I think that's very important, because globalization is actually slowing. Slowbalization is the new thing.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, slowbalization. It was in The Economist this week, that anyone that reads it do get it. And what they're saying is that as the sort of geopolitical shifts take place, we're all becoming actually more insular as nations. Trade is getting less, and that everything is becoming more regional, that it's going to be harder for us to have more meaningful debates about climate change, to really focus beyond the self, and really focus on other people. So in the face of globalization, we're going to have to rely on the Gen Weers to drag us all, and the millennials, to keep that debate going about sustainability and supply chain. And I guess that's why we're here to talk about the power of one. And the, can I move that down slightly? Can people still, I've ruined it now. Sorry, it was really about to go up my nose. So I'll just hold it there for a moment. But at Pure London, Caryn, you joined us brilliantly to help us launch The Power of One. And as we've referenced, in fashion retail, there's been a lot of discussion at government level, thank you very much, towards a more transparent, sustainable supply chain. Are you seeing that? Can you see more companies focusing on supply chain within fashion?
What we have in fashion, which I think has been very, very helpful for everyone, is the sort of the understanding of what needs to happen once you are in a process of committing to conscious design. So it liberates people from feeling, I have to know all the answers, I have to enact all the processes, and I will be found guilty of not doing certain things the minute I put my hand up and say I want to move towards sustainability.
Yeah.
And so certainly what this allows for is companies to make their own brand pledges and statements on their on their websites, through their marketing. I am a conscious designer. I look at what needs to be done now so I can get myself in a better position to enact what needs to be done in the next phase of my development. So it really allows us all, in a way, to get on the first rung,
Yeah.
enter into that process, and develop at our own speeds. And I think this is one of the key things that we wanted to say at Power of One, which is why I was thrilled to be involved.
Caryn and I are very aligned on this, that when we think of climate change, when we think of the big issues, many people we speak to get huge inertia. It's okay if you're Marks and Spencers and you've got big budgets, you've got huge resources to throw at this issue and ensure that every part of your supply chain is sustainable. But most of us don't have that. Most of us are journalists, small retailers, we're running associations, we're creating brands. We need to start with ourselves and our own power. So ultimately, that's why we came up with the Power of One. It's to start with small steps and start with ourselves. So when we launched it at Pure London, our fashion show in London is all about the fashion trade. It sets out to drive small, individual yet powerful steps towards a more sustainable supply chain. And I think that's one of the things we want to say today, is that everyone can make teeny changes towards this. We are working with the UN's Department for Partnerships. And this department will work with any organisation and advise you on what to do. As a reminder, the UN's Sustainable Development Goals are the blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. And they address the global challenges that we face. I can see they're behind me on the screen. And the Power of One is a campaign to highlight these small things that people can do to drive towards the more sustainable future. In fashion, what we did is we focused on goal number 12, which is all about responsible consumption and production. So we developed the campaign around 5 easy-to-adopt pledges that anyone could follow, showing collective action. And this comes back to us all using our social groups, our collective action through social media. One of our pledges was actually I can, saying anyone can make a stand, no voice is too small. And Caryn, I know you've got some interesting things to say about empowerment. And how does empowerment work? How do we galvanise people around us to get involved?
Well, we're learning as we go along that when you start off in a small way with small individual ideas, then you begin to link up with other people who feel the same as you. So what we've told fashion students when we work with them is it begins here. Does it feel right? And if it doesn't feel right, why would you commit to it in your working life for the next 5, 10 years? So does it feel right? I need to say this. I don't have the answers, but it doesn't feel right. And when we connect with that authentic feeling, that's actually the source of our creativity. When we release that space, we're then open to problem solving or looking for a solution. But what we're also doing is enabling others to question what they feel. She thinks it doesn't feel right. You know, I was thinking that too. She said it. I feel I can agree with her. So we begin to build communities in a way that really starts with just being authentic and feeling. So emotion, hugely important in the process. And it's not just women that do it. We know men do it, but we know that you have been, to a certain extent, stuck in a very difficult expectation of what masculinity is about, which is not connecting with emotion. So one could question whether businesses could begin to move more freely if this wasn't a key thing where we don't show emotions and we don't share. And that's certainly one of the benefits that women bring into business, because we are actually, through gender privilege, allowed to be more in touch with those discomforts. I need to talk about this. I'm not feeling good about this.
It reminds me, I don't know if anybody's seen the YouTube video of the guy that starts dancing at a festival. That he's at Glastonbury or somewhere like that. He gets up and starts dancing on his own, and slowly, one by one, people join him. It's an utterly brilliant video. Many of us have used it to explain how you can start a movement. And I think that connects very well to what you've said about he was in his own moment, his own emotions. It felt right to him. And because he thought it was right, others felt it was right. I see this in the workplace all the time. We've all started using these bottles, and it's almost now a little bit of a sin not to have one. We're all filling them up at the water coolers, and many more people are bringing their own lunch into work rather than going to cafes. So we're trying to recycle. But it's when we see others doing it that we feel empowered to do it ourselves. And I think linking back to the emotion, that definitely is why we want to launch the Power of One campaign.
Can I just ask you something? Because obviously, you know, you're in an environment in which you had to propose an idea.
Yes.
And may well have been expecting some obstacles, because that is anyone's experience when they're trying to bring in change, because we are fearful of change. It's not what we know. It's going to make life more difficult. So how did you propose it, and how are you overcoming the perhaps some resistance?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I guess one of the things that people in the organisation, when I said I really want to have a campaign for Pure London, to get people behind it, to work with the UN's global goals, a few people, particularly in corporate comms, said, well, are we squeaky clean? Everything we do, is it 100% sustainable? Do we have complete transparency about everything? And after talking to lots of people in the industry and yourself, what we thought was, actually, if we bring this to the agenda, everyone will start upping their game. We can't wait for us all to be 100% squeaky clean as a fashion brand, as any brand in this show or supplier in this show, to make a change. We need to start with one small thing. So luckily, the organisation went with me. We worked with our brilliant PR company, Good Results, who you know very well. And at ITE, we run the largest events in retail, which is why we decided to roll it out to our other exhibitions. Walking around today, I walked in and many people were taking their selfie with the Power of One board. And it's clear for us that with single-use plastics, there's something we all can do to start the Power of One within retail. So we're launching today some pledges that we'd like everyone to get behind. Please share it with your social media, share it with your followers. Our first one is bring your own. So we want to reduce packaging. Again, this is bring your own bottle, fill them up. We have more water stations around the event so that people can get away from single-use plastics. Pass it on, get serious about recycling and upcycling. I know you're very passionate about that, Caryn. Turn it down, take control of the temperature in your workplaces or at home. And actually, I can be empowered, make a stand and make a change. No voice or action is too small. I passionately believe, and we as a business passionately believe, that small actions from collective groups can really add up. And my call to action today, our call to action today, is go to the Power of One board that's in the piazza, have your photograph taken, share it with your social media groups. Our wonderful partners, Summit International, that are on stand for, I promise to, 4G90, have kindly donated a large number of these wonderful recycled bottles to help with the pledge, so that if you do make a pledge, there's a bottle for you while stocks last. And if you can't go to the Power of One wall, then right here, right now, we want everyone to think about pledging, picking one of the pledges and committing to it on a personal and business level. And that becomes our own Power of One.
I pledge to the actually I can, standing up and speaking out. And I want to give you just a little bit of an insight to this psychological process. In order to be more successful in pushing back, I took myself off to study a Master of Science in Applied Psychology, and it's been hugely beneficial because I've been able to leverage a different language and a different energy. Instead of working from instinct and emotion, which often doesn't go down well in the boardroom, I've been able to say very coolly, well, studies show. But a really important thing, I think, maybe that would empower everyone is understanding what happens with convergent thinking, trends in thinking. They're called informational cascades in psychology. So any trend is labeled an informational cascade, which you can imagine it starts at a place, and as it falls, it gathers more and more momentum. I introduced myself by saying I'm a disruptive fashion lover. Well, I am a disruptor because I stand against that cascade. Now, what actually happens, which I didn't really understand until I began looking into psychology, is I create a safe space for other people to go, I agree. And once we can get to that position where some of us feel more confident about disruption and speaking our truths and feeling, acting on that feeling, the word emotion contains the description of movement. Motion. You feel something, you have to move on it. And that is good for mental health. Once we get to that stage where we do have disruptors standing up against informational cascades, we have other people joining them. And that is just one example of the power of one.
Thank you very much, Caryn. I'd like to say thank you very much to Caryn Franklin, MBE, for joining us today. And thank you all for coming. So have a wonderful time at Spring Fair.